Well, there are several questions tonight about varroa, about diseases, looking ahead to winter, and so I think we're gonna talk about that some with our questions, and we'll. It is just about 5 after, and I think the first few things that I have for tonight are kind of interesting and kind of funny and a little bit light, not really heavy stuff. But so I'm gonna start. You okay with me starting, Robert?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm gonna start. I guess etiquette wise, we ask everybody to mute their screens unless you want to speak. And if you want to speak, don't hesitate. Unmute yourself and speak up and ask a question or make a comment. That's just fine. This is pretty laid back structure on these question and answer. Let's talk bees, and that's what we mean is let's just talk bees. So I'm going to start off with a screen share. And it is, let's see if I can get my pictures up here where I'm going to do that. Hang on. Now, that isn't the way it's supposed to work. I can't get this into show. Can you see a picture, Robert?
Not yet.
Well, share, but this is what I want to share. Does that
There
share?
you go.
There we go. I hit the share button. Okay. So my question is, where a lot of us are extracting honey right now, and when you get Cheryl's buzzer this next couple weeks, I wrote a whole article about this for the buzzer, and basically this one is, what's wrong with this picture, and do you want to buy this guy's honey? As it, and I will tell you, I kind of blurred the face, but if you know this guy, I'm betting you could pick him out of a crowd, but that's, I hope not.
Sorry, is that a guy?
Good question. I believe it is, but I'm not certain. Women who go with only their bibbies are a little braver than
not to mention the insane amount of armpit hair.
There is that. So anybody like to contribute of our group? What are you thinking about here when you see this?
She got a little too much sun.
Well, there is that. He got a little too much sun. That's a nice positive, Robert. You know, my first one was, well, at least he is covering the hair on his head. And that is a positive. When you're extracting honey, you want to make sure that is it. But the point I made in the article that I wrote for Cheryl is that
that's not a woman, right?
It is not a woman. It is a guy.
Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't think.
Yeah, no, it's not a woman. It is a guy, a hairy pitted guy. And
I thought it was a woman without a bra.
Oh, now that's exciting.
With flat planes.
Okay. If the only person you're producing honey for is yourself, then I guess you can do whatever you darn well please. But if you have any intention of sharing your harvest, I think you kind of need to think about that and what other people might think when you're doing this. So we've got a couple of these. What's wrong with this picture? So let me see if I can pull up the next one. I'm gonna have to stop that. And then I go back to share my screen.
So was that one of those uncapping things where you put your frame in and it like cuts it off or something?
I don't know. It might be. That I didn't really focus on that. You got a point there. I don't know. Let me see if I can pull up the next picture that is also of interest. No, we might not be going to do this if I can't make this work a little smoother. I really did practice. I practiced at home. And no, I don't want to leave the meeting. That was not what I meant to do at all. Here's my screen share. And desktop. Can you see that one? Nope.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so this resourceful person has used, it looks like, some used maybe beverage bottles to put what would be chunk honey in. Has anybody see anything wrong with this picture?
A little too much protein for my taste.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You think? Okay, so
They're capped. I mean, does that help?
yeah, I think that helps. They're capped. So yeah, when you make your chunk honey, you want the comb to be that thin surplus foundation, and it should not have pollen. It should not have empty cells, and it most assuredly should not have brood. So we'll try the next one.
We actually had a member who used to be president of this club who sold comb honey in squares from brewed comb. Now there wasn't brood in it, but it was from brewed comb and it was disgusting.
It wasn't me though.
No, it was not. It was way before you.
No, but I remember who that was because he still does that every once in a while.
So someone made a comment on Facebook today about selling brewed comb honey and whether that was a desirable thing or not. I thought was the gist of the question, and I didn't really know even how to answer, and thought maybe I was out of the loop, that that's something that people found appealing. But
It actually is a delicacy in third world countries. You know, go figure. But yeah, in some of the Orient and let's see, I want to say the countries like Korea, Vietnam, and then China. The brewed comb actually is a desirable delicacy.
well, I know, like the Nepal honey hunters, the ones that climb the cliffs and bring down the big combs, that they eat the comb and the brood and everything in it. But okay, anyway, that was just an odd question. So
Did anybody see there was it may have been on Facebook or something, and it was an Asians, and they did not have any supers on their hives, and they were taking that and they were extracting it just like that. I mean, one right after the other, and then they put them back. It's got to scramble the brood up, doesn't it?
well, you'd think so. So this person wrote that they took 7 frames from deep brood boxes. And I guess the real question I'd like, so is it ever appropriate, or under what conditions is it acceptable to harvest from brood boxes? This is a question that's been asked a lot of times. They said, okay, I've got 10 deep frames of honey in one of my deep brood boxes. Do I need to leave all of that for the bees, or can I extract some of it for my use? Is it, and under what conditions is it okay to take some brood box honey?
Well, if you are early in the season, if you're late May through the month of June, and you've got a congestion concern in your brood boxes, and the queen's got to a point where there's no room to lay, there's definitely an option to take out a couple of frames of honey. If you have drawn comb, replace that to give her room, and move those obviously to the center, and try to configure it close to her current brood chamber, so as to easily entice her to utilize those frames. And if you don't, you can obviously replace it with straight foundation, and hopefully, because you'll still have a nectar flow that early in the season, they'll draw that out quickly enough to allow her room to lay. But that's an option if you've got congestion and you need to alleviate that. You can harvest a frame or two. And you can even just put an empty frame in and then harvest it and put it right back in, that same day. That way, you don't lose that, timing on trying to draw that new foundation out to comb. But I think that's an option.
I think these people we're talking about right now, they've realized that if their bees might not be going to work up into their honey super, but they've got a lot of honey in the brood box. Is it appropriate or permissible to harvest a few frames, a frame or two, out of a deep brood box right now?
I would say it's not the most advisable technique, and it's not the best thing to do, because if there turns into a time period where our nectar flow completely shuts down, we're in a dearth, and then there's no opportunity for those bees to backfill those frames that you've taken out, then you're going to do some supplemental feeding to ensure they have food reserves enough to get through the winter. And that would be the main concern. There would be just ensuring that they have those reserves that's necessary to make it through the winter.
And so it's always a gamble. If you're going to do that, it is somewhat of a gamble. Robert, did you have something to add? Or Steve,
My
I'm sorry.
thought was if they didn't go up into the super, there was a reason. And we confuse bees probably way too much. If they hadn't gone up the super, then there wasn't a need for it, or they didn't want to, and they've stored what they want to get through with the winter. If I had to extract because of honey-bound hive, that's a possibility, like Chad said, but it would certainly be the outside frames, because they usually have not had brood in them, so it's probably a little better honey, but that's about it. If you're looking for it for yourself, I guess that's the gamble you want to take. That's okay. My gamble is already to get my bees through the winter. That's our biggest objective.
With the water that we have this coming right now, we've had more moisture this summer, and I think if I look at my crystal ball that we have a chance to have a pretty decent fall flow. And so I think this year it'd probably be a smaller gamble than some. The thing that makes it not at all appropriate is if those frames have ever been treated for varroa mite. And then, so it could only be almost like a one-time deal. Brand new hive, you might be able to take a frame or two, but honestly, it is a gamble, and I agree with that. I have one more picture I was hoping to share. This one is a little different topic. Come on. Where did it go? Get all these screens to move around the way I want them to. Okay. Can you see that? No.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can maximize it here. So what do you think went on in this picture?
It looks like they put a screened trap in there for a queen cage.
Good guess. Then what happened?
There weren't any bees in there to protect, and the little beetles got in and laid eggs.
That is exactly it. So trying to requeen a weak colony. Beetles are more of a problem in a weak colony. They were trying to requeen it, so they used a push-in cage, which is a good way to requeen an awful lot of the time. But in this case, beetles got into that push-in queen cage. The workers could not get in there to corral the beetles. Beetles were a big enough problem that it cost them a hive. this hive went down to beetle damage. So I thought those were some of the interesting
Kind of one
things that-
note, Becky, on it, if you're gonna use a push-in cage and you're gonna put a queen in there, you're to put that where you have emerging brood.
yeah,
You
yeah.
don't have any emerging brood, this is exactly what'll happen. And because there's nothing in there to take, even if you have a few workers in there, it isn't enough to take care of it. Most of my push-in cages that I use, I push them up in the corner. One, because usually the corner has food, has honey up there, and it's over emerging brood. So, and it just looks like a mistake. But those are the things you look at when you use a push-in cage, is to make sure they have food to eat and you got young bees coming out.
Well, I think this was a real inexperienced beekeeper, and I think that they had a little bit of knowledge and just, again, it looks like there might have been a chance for some brood in there, but honestly, not enough, and that didn't work out for them. So requeening this time of year, I think, is real chancy. Anybody try to introduce queens this late in the year, or do you just do something else? You find a hive that's queenless now. What do you do?
I prefer to merge.
This time of year, I think that's really, really what we.
I merge, but we're also talking to beekeepers that have usually lots of bees.
Yeah.
So, and
Yes.
I get when you have one or two hives and you've nursed them all year long, and then all of a sudden things go south. I get that, and but sometimes you're way better off to cut your loss, make that other hive really strong, and make a split next spring.
That is hard to do. I remember being, I did have 4 hives and now I'm going to have 2 hives, and that's not a good feeling at all. So, but 2 hopefully real healthy hives. All right, that's
Hey,
all my
Becky.
pictures, except I think
Becky?
Cheryl might have a picture for us later. I'm not sure. We'll see if Cheryl wants to share something. So our first question tonight comes from Dana, and Dana says, I have decided to let my struggling hive go away. I opened it today and had a lot of hive beetle larvae, and the requeen did not work. Is it okay to leave the hive open, frames separated, so my other hive can scavenge any of the honey that is left? Hives are about 20 feet apart. Then I guess I will start prepping this hive for a split next spring. Any advice will be greatly appreciated. So Dana's got a hive that's just like not doing it, and she's just going to open it up and let him take care of it. What do you think? Steve is doing the bobblehead. This is no. This is. Are you muted? You're muted again.
If again, if I have another hive and without knowing how much small hive beetles are in there, but that's a secondary deal, I would probably salvage what I can and move it on top of the other hive, merge it, and take the rest of it and freeze everything and deal with it next year.
Jolie, it seems to me like I've heard you speak on something like this. Do you have anything you want to contribute?
Well, I don't think I would leave the hive open because that could cause robbing. Like I think Steve just said that, which could affect her other hive, even though it's like 20 feet apart. But like people in the Carolinas and Georgia, where they do have a lot more small hive beetle than us, that is one way they store their comb, is so the light can get to it and kind of help take care of some of the small hive beetle. But I don't know what I'd do to get rid of the small hive beetle. What would you do?
But I didn't hear Cecil.
Yeah, stick the frames in the freezer, maybe a couple at a time to kill the hive beetle, and try and salvage your comb before it gets slimed.
I'm afraid that if she opens it up like that, that when they start that robbing behavior, she won't have any comb left either.
Exactly.
just-
They'll just shred it.
They'll just rip that apart. And so, yeah, I understand her wanting to save that, but honestly, I think that freezing is probably the best option, and maybe put it in a bag in her freezer, because she's going to end up freezing her bees and everything, and it will be an awful mess. But by just letting it rub out, those beetles fly too. And so they're gone to someplace else. And so I think it's just compounding the problem an awful lot there.
Becky,
Okay.
Becky, I had a question on, was asked Amir. Somebody was telling me what they were doing, and they had uncapped some honey and extracted that, and then they took the cappings and left them out for the bees to clean up.
Uh-huh.
And again, it causes robbing. It causes, if you have some bees from somewhere else come in there and they have AFB, then you spread that into your hive. I mean, there's all kinds of situations. And so my suggestion was if you want to feed that to your bees, do it inside the hive, not outside.
Yeah.
It just, and robbing, and I'll tell you, I did leave some stuff out early this year accidentally, and robbing occurred, and they killed my biggest rooster. So that's how vicious they can actually get. They stung this rooster so many times in the head it killed him.
Wow.
So I'm just
Good
telling you,
grief.
that's just how vicious this stuff gets if they start robbing. So, and you don't want to be there either.
Well, and I think that people are thinking my other hive will make use of those resources. And unfortunately, we don't know what hive is making use of those resources, and whether it's a feral colony, as you said, are they bringing in mites? Are they, we got all kinds of things that are going on there. So that's avoiding that at all costs. We haven't talked a lot about open feeding. We're getting into the feeding season, but it's exactly the same situation if you choose to open feed your bees. Not quite as bad, but almost as the same kind of thing. The next question came from the Nebraska Beekeepers group, and I don't have a name on that, but the Nebraska Bee says, just how do you deal with cappings on a small scale? So if you only have a couple of hives, what do you do with your cappings? Is Joe Pat here tonight? I haven't seen her.
She was trying to log in.
She may not have made it, so.
I just got here.
Hey, Joe Pat.
My invitation went to spam, and so I didn't know when it came, and so I'm a little flustered. But the question is just a small amount of cappings.
Yeah.
If you've only got like a couple of supers, I would just put that in a baggie and freeze it.
Exactly. I think a lot of beekeepers think that they're going to have enough to make a candle with, and that's why I like to teach people to make lip balm, because you might have enough to make a few lip balms, and that's about it. Not very much, but this is a question from our Facebook group. Why would bees start uncapping their brood? Nice frame of brood, and they are ripping the tops off of it. What's going on there? Robert, you haven't contributed much tonight. What do you think?
I believe that's called bald brood. And that's where they're removing the caps to try to, it's a hygienic behavior and trying to help out with removing mites.
I think that's probably a good guess from all the information we have, that everything would lead back to, first thing I check is a mite problem. And then again, let's talk about Steve Messberger's program for this month. We're going to talk about mites, so it'll be a good one.
I have seen, Becky, too, an issue where resources were at a minimum,
Mm.
and they'll go in and cannibalize Brewed.
Yep.
And that can be a concern if there's not enough resources, and there's a requirement for a nutrient value, or they're cannibalizing just to remove them because they know they can't feed them.
Yeah.
And they're
You know what?
subpar. So
Yeah, that is exactly right. Need to read your frames. Look at those frames. Somebody later on is asking about, is it time to feed pollen? And not in my hives. My hives have plenty of pollen right now, but that doesn't mean your hives do. And so you need to get in that hive and really look for sure. So good point that they will cannibalize that. They might be uncapping them, but I think this person was also saying she was seeing pupa drug out of the hive, and that's not a cannibalized. That probably is mites. That probably is a mite situation. So this is from Javon, and Javon says, is it a good or a bad idea to melt wax and paint it on empty frames to use to make comb? I have a new hive that still has a lot of frames to fill before winter. Miss Cheryl, are you out there anyplace?
Yeah,
Would
do you hear me?
Did you hear the question?
Yes, did she was asking if she could paint her undrawn frames with wax.
It is Javon, and yes, is that a good idea? And then they go on, I have a new hive that still has a lot of frames to fill before winter.
It's fine to paint your frames, but we're past time for them to really draw wax much. Even if you would lightly feed them, they're just not going to draw wax. We're past summer solstice, and they just don't want to draw wax this late in the season. So painting the frames is fine, but that's not going to get them to draw it out.
Do you really think that helps? Do you think that helps improve wax drawing to do that?
It doesn't hurt. I mean, I use that bar method like you did in the video that I think it's a lot of work to melt it and brush it on there, but I've tried the white wax that I've rendered and just scratched it on the foundation like we showed in our video when we were doing the nukes. And I think they took to it a little better, maybe.
yeah, I've seen quicker acceptance on a frame that might have just a light coating of wax, depending on the supplier that you purchase from. You know, some suppliers will only put a single coating on, unless you happen to inadvertently buy uncoated. And then some suppliers will put a double coating on. And in my experience, you know, what I've seen is, you know, the better the coating, the quicker the acceptance and the faster that they have a tendency to build out on. Is that the case always? No, but I would say that from what I've seen a majority of the time, it can be beneficial.
It's certainly not going to hurt anything. So it might help, but it won't hurt anything, that's for sure. Matthew has asked the question, I extracted honey into buckets and let it settle. What is the best way to get the foam and thicker stuff, which can be some wax and whatnot, off the top? Is Matthew Mertz here today? Is he on? He wasn't earlier. I emailed him today, but I didn't get a response.
I don't see him.
Okay. He supposedly has a little video of using the Saran wrap method. Jolie, I think you're the person who taught me how to do that. You want to talk about using Saran wrap or plastic wrap instead of Saran?
Yeah, so we do usually use some kind of plastic wrap like Saran, and we pat it down on the top of the barrel or bucket and pat it down so that it lays across the whole thing. And then when you pick it up, like all your foam and stuff sticks to it. So you have to have a bowl really close so you can put your saran wrap into. And but it'll usually pick it up. The other thing we've used is like a I call it a bread, like when you're making bread, you have one of those
Dough
plastic.
scraper.
A dough scraper works
Yeah,
really
yeah,
good. Something
yeah.
like that. You can kind of skim off the top with that too. So anyway.
Do you find, Jolie, this is Matthew, do you find that it only took, because I tried it again tonight on a bucket and I had better success than the first time I tried it, but it still left quite a
Yeah,
bit there.
it'll leave a little in the center and then you have to use a spoon or something.
Okay. Yeah, because it's funny you mentioned the dough cutter, because that's exactly what I ended up using instead of the saran wrap, is I just kind of floated it across the top up to an edge and then just scooped it out. So
Yeah.
I just didn't know if I was missing some magic bean that
I
made it.
used like a spatula and work it to the edges and get it out. So that works for me.
Okay.
But I haven't been real successful with the saran wrap. Usually
But
I
I
make
can't remember
a
if the
bigger
question,
mess than I do anything. So
Did you
Yeah,
strain it before bucketing?
the other thing is to
Yes.
let it sit for at least 24 hours and let everything rise. And it might have said that in the question. I don't remember.
In a warm place.
In a warm
Yeah,
place.
no, I had no problem with it floating to the top. It was just, getting it off was the challenge. And yes, once again, YouTube made it look very simple.
So from our chat box, before this gets completely away from me, it looks like Dave asked a question, says, I saw one bee with badly deformed wings. My mite count is 1 per 100 3 weeks ago. And should I do another count? Anybody want to field that question? I think that's a good question.
If he has deformed wings, he should have treated, he doesn't need another mite count. That's your answer. You got too many mites in your hive now. You need to take your supers off and treat now.
Yes. So Dave, I think a good question is, how well do you feel like your count was, and did you do it a couple of times? I'm not sure we're always really accurate in our test strategy, and I like the powdered sugar roll, but I've done it a lot and I feel pretty comfortable with that. A lot of other people have said things like, no, you really need to do an alcohol wash because that's a more accurate count and those kind of things. And so 3 weeks ago in mite world is a long time. And so I would say you definitely need to treat for sure. And then after you treat, he says, I tried both types, both wash types. Well, one per 100 wouldn't be something that would be astounding, but I tell you what, the wing deal is just, that's a big thing. So that definitely is a sign of mites, that's for sure. After you do your treatment, be sure you test again. Cheryl, did you have a
I didn't say anything, but the green came around my screen. I don't know.
It wanted you to talk.
It did. It wanted me to talk, I guess.
Okay.
But
well, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would treat too. And I think sometimes people rush. I can't answer if he did like an alcohol wash, but I think sometimes beekeepers rush when they do a powdered sugar roll. I think that where did I read that they should actually put a timer on for about 2 minutes after you roll them, and I would leave them out of the sun while you have them in that quart jar. But I would make sure you get enough powdered sugar on them and agitate them quite a bit and let them sit there and boil for a while before you do the shake, so that you really can get those mites worked off of the bee's surface. So I think they just rush it sometimes. So
I think you're right. You're right. Christy submitted 2 questions from people that she works with. And the first one is, Why are my bees still swarming this late? Now, there's a good question. Is Nikki Bowman on here today? Nikki sometimes joins us. She had late swarms. She was just fighting them. So who would like to talk about why bees might still be swarming?
Wow. That's a problem.
Nikki was on. I thought I saw her earlier.
This year's been strange all the way around.
Yeah, but she's living in an area where, I mean, it's not her, maybe it's her question. She's living in an area that has some neighbors that apparently aren't handling their bees so well this year.
Well, and that can be it. We have to also think this time of year, last year, we started seeing something that's not a reproduction swarm, but it's an absconding swarm. And that, again, is another sign of mite load. And so,
or beetles.
Yeah, or beetles. You get something in there. And so if you get into your hive and your bees just are gone, that's not a swarm. That is more of like an absconding. But honestly, they swarm for the same reason they did in June. They're too crowded upon occasion. I mean, it's that you didn't keep track of that. So Christy's other question is my honey ready to extract? Some isn't capped. And we had several questions over the last couple weeks about moisture in honey. Cheryl, do you have your picture that you could put up on the screen?
I've never screen shared. Would you believe that?
Well, I'm so smooth at it that I know you don't want to do it.
Well, what do you want me to show?
The one with your stacked supers and the fan, wasn't that? Oh, that's not your picture. That's north. Did you send me that? It's from the north.
Those were mine.
Is that yours? We'll share it and show us. See if you can get it up there.
Well, you're gonna make me do this just like out of the blue, right?
I told you were gonna have to share something. You didn't listen?
I work, you know.
All right, we'll come back to you. Oh, there it is. Look at this.
See, that was easy.
She did it. She did it smoother than I did. That's super. So you have cross stacked your supers.
Those two bottom ones on the left don't have any frames in them at all. So this was early this spring, and so I just did it to raise it up off of the thing. So yeah, just the yellow and the white and then the purple over here. And there's probably, I kind of divide them by moisture count, if that makes sense. So like if I know that like the one on the left might be 20 or 21, it's going to take longer. The one on the right might be lower. So I kind of divide them so that they'll be ready so I can work one stack or the other. I don't know. That's just what I do.
So you got the dehumidifier in the middle. And this looks like a pretty small room, not a whole lot of space.
Well, that's actually in my extraction house. It's over in the corner, but I can bring the whole 24 by 24 room down to about 32 on a humidity without doing any, tarps or small room enclosures. And I can set the temperature in that building however I want. But for a smaller, smaller operation, I should have brought up the other one, because I've actually, let's try this again. I actually have done one in the laundry room before. I had a honey house out back. Now, why won't it let me share here? There we go. And that's a smaller room that I can close up, and I can close off the vent to the air conditioner, and it gets pretty warm in there. And I can bring but my dehumidifier only goes down to 30% humidity. So I can't take it any lower than that, or at least I can't get a reading any lower than that. So, and those are crisscross stacked just on those sheet pans.
But you're sucking a lot of water out of the air.
Yeah, and I don't, this is set up so you could run a hose off the back of it into a drain. But when I'm in the house, I have to be diligent to come and pull the reservoir out the back and dump it. Down at the honey house now, I just have screwed in a hose that goes to a center drain in the middle of the floor, so I don't have to mind it. But you need to go in there, because you'd be surprised that thing had shut off in the middle of the night because it was full. Until you get enough of the moisture out of the air in the room the first couple days. Once you get all the moisture out, then you're fine. It'll stay down for you. But yeah, if you can drop it a point or two in 24 hours, you're doing good. So, but I kind of stack them by how much moisture, how much time they need to get the moisture out of them. I didn't have too many this year that were real high until here lately with some open stuff that I'm pulling off so I can get treatment on. I had some this weekend running 19 to 21. So.
Yeah, so I think we measured some when we took some out a few weeks ago in beginning of the month. And the frames that were on the end that were still open, uncapped, were somewhat capped, but those had a lower moisture content than the capped cells did, which was kind of amazing.
That does happen though. When that just shows how flexible things can be, that it will change with conditions. Don't pull honey in the rain, because you're going to end up with some really high moisture honey and that sort of thing. So so it doesn't, can you extract honey if it isn't all capped?
Yes.
Yeah, you just kind of hope it averages out. Okay, the next question is from Dave, and Dave's question is a long one, and I will try to read it correctly. It's got a lot of information. I will do a second honey harvest on August 15th to the 17th, and then we'll treat all the hives for varroa. I will be unable to work on the hives the rest of the year due to medical issues, so I have only this one shot at the mites. Most of the hives at that point will not have supers, but a few will have supers that still need more time on the hives. I'll have a friend pull those off late in September. My hive boxes are 2 to 3 boxes deep, very heavy. I have a lot of capped brood in every box at this time. The local soy and sunflowers are just beginning to bloom now, and I expect the hives to remain strong due to ample pollen, nectar, cool weather. May need to keep some supers on the hives through September to avoid crowding. Here's his questions. Should I move all the brood to the bottom brood boxes, or as many as will fit prior to treatment? What do you think? Move the brood to the bottom boxes. Is that important now? I don't think it's critical myself, but I mean, no.
I mean, the bees will move it. The bees will take care of it in time, and he's going to treat the whole hive for varroa, so that doesn't matter. So
good point. So number 2, assuming the temperatures will be above 90, which miticide will give me the best control on the hives with the supers on, and which miticide will work the best with no supers? This is kind of getting into Steve Musburger's program for this month. He's laughing.
You're going to speak loudly.
I just thought you had no mute.
Oh. Speak up. Speak up.
I don't want to answer that.
The only thing the only thing legal to use on the hide with supers on it is the formic acid. Oh, that answers that question.
So Formic Pro or the Mitaway Quick Strips, or I thought you could use HopGuard.
And HopGuard too.
Oh, and
but it's not real effective, I don't think. It doesn't have high efficacy ratings, but those are the 2. So what's wrong with those 2 miticides? I can use them with my supers on.
But if it's over 90 degrees, you can't, over 90, 85, I think you can't use them. You just have to read the directions.
It is not very hot. And so you only have one choice, but you can't use it if it's typical. Could have used it today, but that's about it.
Since when did we ever get an accurate weather forecast from a weatherman either?
Want.
Knowing my luck, I'd put them on and it'd be 90 degrees today and I'd fry everybody.
You know what? I know somebody that did. I know somebody that looked at the forecast. The forecast said it was going to be 85 was the high, and it went up to 92. So he killed some bees. So what miticide right now do you prefer if you're going to take off your supers? Just kind of anybody, kind of round robin, what do you like to use?
I'd use Apigard, but he said he only could do it once. I assumed he can only treat it once. He's got to come back 10 to 14 days and put a second treatment on, and it's good up to 105, I believe. So, I mean,
it's a lot more flexible. It's a lot more flexible. That would probably be mine, but you really are supposed to isn't Apigard 2 treatments?
Yes, it
Yes.
is. Yep.
Okay.
I don't know, Robert, what about oxalic acid, but that's only going to be a one-shot deal.
Yeah, that's what I would do is oxalic acid vapor is my preference, but that's what I'm used to. Because the temperature requirement is greater than 40 degrees, which it is, and there's no higher limit. But you may have to treat 3 times because of having some sealed brood. And so you've got to do that every 5 or 6 days for the next, 10, 12 days. On day 0, if you did it today, and then day 6, and then day 12, or day 5, or day 10. I'm looking at another chart here, which I may post as a file in there that's got a list of all of them: Apigard, Apilife, Apistan, Apivar. And it tells how many times you need to treat, what the active ingredient is, what the daytime temperatures need to be, how much it costs, whether you can use supers on. So basically, supers on is only Formic Pro, HopGuard, and the formic acid. So I'll see if I can get that posted out there as a little file in the chat.
Who put that out? That sounds like.
And that came from. Let's see, I believe I got it from Comparing Mite Treatment article in Bee Culture, August of 2016.
Oh, it's even a little bit old. Okay, cool.
So
Somebody
prices
had
may have
one
changed.
from Cornell that had put out one that was real similar. Cornell University had one that's a good chart like that as well. So Dave has one more questions, and he's asking if he should feed protein patties to the hives while mite treatment is on, or wait till afterwards. I think expand that question. Do you feed while you are treating for mites?
Well, I think the question would be, do they need to be fed, and especially protein?
Yes.
Not this time of year. There's plenty. We live in a great part of the world where they get good sources of protein. It's not out there all the time, but there's a lot of pollen after we get these summer rains going and the weeds kicking.
I would be surprised.
Which one was our speaker said on those protein patties that they studied it and they ate the syrup out of it and drug the rest out of the hive?
Randy Oliver, didn't he?
I don't know. It wasn't Randy, because Randy's big on that. But
Well,
he's
I know
in California where it is. It was Jerry Hayes, I think.
Jerry, yeah, Jerry. You're right.
And that's just, and also you gotta remember those protein patties, the small hive beetles love that stuff.
No, this time of year.
You'll have more small hive beetles in there, and you can shake a stick at it if they take over.
So, but I think probably what we need to do is say what the underlying reason is. The bees need protein. Who needs it? It's the younger bees that are hatching out in the fall. They need it for their skeleton. They need it for their nutrition. They need it for their long life that's going to carry them through the winter time. And so it's really the bees that'll be hatching out and raised in September and the rest of the fall that need it. Cheryl and I came across an interesting term looking at monarch stuff. It's called the Methuselah generation. Methuselah is a character in the Old Testament that lived a long time. And so we were talking about the caterpillars, and Chip had his pollinator talk. But the Methuselah generation, I think we should introduce that, Cheryl, you and I.
Yeah.
Because those are the bees that are going to live the next 5 to 6 months, carry them through the winter. But they are the ones that need the.
It was our speaker that said, "Take care of the bees that take care of the bees that go into winter."
Right. Well, we'll name those the Methuselah generation.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that really need the protein, and they usually, if you look in your hive right now, you should see a lot of pollen that's the bees are still have got available. So, do you need to feed? I wouldn't.
And we've talked about that. When you're doing your inspection, you're going to those outside frames first. Those are usually the ones that have your pollen in the stores. So that's part of your everyday inspection, that when you do an inspection, that's what you're looking at. I mean, and I understand that some people start a hive late, so pollen could be a shortage, but it's usually not in this area. So part of your inspection is look over all those frames as you take them out to do an inspection and see where they're at. I have found one year, I found one place that my bees were pollen stricken, and I had to move them out of there because there just wasn't anything for them for whatever reason. I don't know. And so, and as we lose hives and stuff, we store that stuff and we save that stuff so that if there is a hive, then we have those frames we can add to those hives that need it. So just a little kind of heads up, and that's why we really protect. Even if we have a dead out, we freeze everything and then we protect that stuff so that we can reuse it with other hives to get them through. So.
Some of our most valuable resources. So here's a quick one. What does it mean to store my supers wet? I think Cheryl used that term pretty recently.
I don't put them back out on the hive after I extract. I leave them wet right as they come out of the extractor, and I stack them that way. Sometimes beekeepers will put them back on the hive for a day or two just so they can clean it up. The wax tends to be a little drier. I think they jump on them better in the spring when they're stored wet, and it's labor intensive, quite honestly, to put things back out on a hive, even if it's just on a couple of hives right outside your extraction room, to put them on for 24 hours at a time. So I just store them wet.
So then they said, so what do you do then? Just stack them in the basement? That was the question.
I stack mine and put on paradichlorobenzene, which is paramoth, to prevent wax moth or anything from getting in there. And then I keep them sealed up so I don't get other stuff in there. I mean, where I have them now, I don't think I'm going to have any type of issue. Some people store them outside in a shed. You want to seal them up so that you can't, mice and stuff can't gain access to them. Some people put queen excluders in on the top and use a legitimate lid and stuff, so try to seal them up so you don't get critters and stuff that you don't want in there. And then the paradichlorobenzene will keep the wax moth out. I don't have trouble with small hide beetle. I don't let the queen ever come up and lay in my supers, so I don't have protein in my honey supers that would be a factor to getting small hive beetle or anything up in there. I just never have had an issue with it. Some people freeze their frames. They can freeze them and then put them for storage.
And
I
that
think
that's a good strategy, is to freeze them. But this time of year, if you extract it now and you were freezing your frames and you don't have infinite freezer space, so you freeze them for 3 or 4 days and then take them out, they're still susceptible to having wax moth get into them. We have wax moths. I killed a wax moth on my screen this week. So they are prevalent right now. I would think that would be dangerous.
I think the small hive beetle are in a competition with the wax moth to see who can get your hive first.
Well, there's that. That's for sure. We're almost out of questions here. Most of the questions, if I didn't touch on them, they really have a lot to do with Varroa. And we are going to have, in 2 weeks, have a regular monthly meeting. It is IPM, Varroa, treatment, detection, the whole 9 yards. I know Steve's already got a lot of that covered. So I'm not feeling bad that we're not getting to every one of these questions tonight.
Hey, Becky, can I add one piece on the part about storing supers wet?
You got it.
Yeah, Cheryl had some great points, and the point that I also like for storing supers wet is just that wax kept wet through the winter does not dry out. And if you put a super back on a hive, they clean it up to the point where it's completely dry, then you store it. That wax that sits dry for several months actually becomes a little fragile. And so storing it wet keeps a moisture content to the wax, which, actually in my opinion and in my experience, is not as easily damaged when you're moving supers, when you're unstacking them in the spring and getting them ready to put out. They're less fragile, and that wax holds together better, and it doesn't get flaky on you.
So
I agree.
My 2 cents, there's also the theory that by putting them away wet, that honey is going to crystallize, and crystals build off crystals. So when the next spring comes around and the bees store nectar in it and make it into honey, that it's going to crystallize quicker because it's already got crystals in it. So just a different perspective.
That is known to be true as well. Crystals grow on crystals. So I hadn't thought about that really as being a contributor to crystallized honey. Our spring honey doesn't crystallize real readily, but I don't know. I don't think so. So Dan has asked kind of the parting shot question here, and we're about at 8 o'clock, so we probably ought to wrap this up. He said, when should we treat for mites, this summer, fall? And I think we've covered that pretty well, and kind of depends on your hive, but now, and certainly Steve Musburger is going to talk about that in 2 weeks. But is there anything else we should be doing during August? And so what are your August chores that we kind of do that wrap up, kind of wrap up of the year? Why don't we just kind of name one thing that we should be doing right now in our beekeeping, because this is kind of the end of the beekeeping season. So start with Jolie. Why don't you lead off? What should we be doing right now besides treating for mites?
Well, when we pull our honey off, we like to go back and make sure that, we look down in every single solitary hive, make sure that A, they have food, but B, they have a good laying queen, and now they should still have quite a few frames of brood with all stages of brood and young bees. And so that's like the most important. Is your hive queen right, and do you have brood? And if not, you want to take your losses in the fall. And if you have another hive, combine, if you have a queenless hive, now you would just combine it with another hive, even if it's, 3 or 4 deeps on there or something. So
this time of year, you still have some options. And this time of year, you can make it into a healthy hive that it would be really easy right now to let that get out of control if you ignored it. Anybody else have another strategy for August? What are we doing in August?
Mine is to extract and get the supers off. At least my goal is to try to get done by Labor Day for sure. I'd like to get off.
Do you leave any supers on? Do you leave a super on stronger hives or anything like that?
So they still have a lot of bees, and in my opinion, they need the room, and I don't like to scrunch them all down into the brood boxes until September. So and it's easier to protect them. I have to store everything out in the shed, and I don't use any chemicals to protect them. So by the time the cooler weather comes and the shorter days, I don't seem to have any problems with the wax moths where I'm storing them. So
good thought. Good thought. Steve Musburger, you got a parting shot?
Well, I kind of do things at the same time I'm pulling my supers. As soon as I got the supers off the hive, I do check, make sure if it's a strong hive, I do like Robert says, I'll put something on to give them some room. But if it's normal, then I use a 3-inch spacer on top of my hives, and it goes all winter like that, so I can feed. I use the hard candy fondant to feed in the winter. I know some people feed liquid. So that goes on, plus it gives me room. I start my mite treatment right then at the same time, and just double check those weak hives if I have a weak one, and then after that it's just maintain and see how your bees are doing. Make sure hopefully you got a good queen in there. She's doing what she's supposed to.
Anybody else have something to contribute here for August chores that they see that need to be done? That's pretty much it.
Yeah, the other thing, Becky, is you might even do the heft check, make sure they've got, some weight to those hives. That if I think I've got one that doesn't, then I'll put a feeder on. I won't feed till later on, but there'll be a feeder on there, and then I know that one probably needs fed at some point. So
we weren't good at getting down into we aren't good at getting into the brood nest while we have honey supers on. So as those honey supers come off, that's when we're doing just exactly what Jolie said. I want to make sure now that I'm queen right, because if something happened, I want to get it before it goes to a laying work situation or something else. Cheryl, did you have something?
No, I mean, if you've got any failed hives, now's the time to pull that comb before it gets damaged with small hive beetle or wax moth, and store that or take it to other colonies that need the resources. I do a little bit of evening out colonies at this time. I mean, there's time to still do it later on, but we get into an area, I want to kind of equalize the strength, so I have less likelihood of robbing. So sometimes I'll rob from the rich and give to the poor right now too.
That's
to kind of equalize the colonies.
Well, there were a few questions we didn't get to. They were almost all related to varroa mite, which is a big topic right now, but I think they will all be answered at our monthly meeting, our speaker that's going to do the IPM varroa. And I'll make sure that the questions get passed on to that speaker so that they can be sure and know that that's something they need to target. Anybody else have something for before we end up tonight? I don't want this to run on, and we're after 8 o'clock, so.
Wyatt and Cooper Marshall, they were asking about thoughts on Permacone, and I kind of answered my opinion in the chat, but if anybody else has anything to add. I basically said it's flexible when you're cutting the cappings off, so I don't like it for that reason. The other part is that if it's the all plastic frames and foundation, the bees tend to build a lot of burr comb on those. They don't recognize it like they do the wood. And it makes it real messy when you're going in and doing inspections or pulling high bodies apart.
We have not liked the plastic frames either, for exactly the same. They do an end-to-end wiggle. Steve bought a box of the Better Bee new fake wax. It's a vegetable base. It is not a plastic base, and it's like it's called Better something. He just wanted to see what it was like, and you got to buy it to see it. So so far the hive he put it on, they've put nectar in it. They have not, the queen has not laid in it yet, and it's a deep box. It's one where she should be able to lay. So I don't know whether that means she doesn't want to lay in it or she just hasn't needed to lay in it yet. But with that will be it's not Permacone, but it's something that is similar. So we'll keep that in mind, but it's not plastic, which I kind of like better. Vegetable wax.
Mike asked a question about finding sugar. It's hard to find. If you know somebody that has a Restaurant Depot card, you can go down there and buy all the sugar you want. So if you're really hard up for sugar, Restaurant Depot has no limits on sugar. You can get 50-pound or 25-pound bags, all out. You want it.
And I see a lot of it. I see it at Aldi. I think it's $1.73 for a 4-pound sack.
Yeah.
Okay.
While we're on the subject of anybody needing anything, I'm just getting ready to head down to Mennonite country on Wednesday. And I know people are talking about a shortage of rings and lids if they use mason jars for either canning or for their honey production. If you need some, they sell reams of 100 down there, and I'm going to bring back quite a few. So if you need some, let me know either tonight yet, or Wednesday morning, and I can put you on the list and grab some extras. Because I know that you can't find canning supplies at most stores right now.
Good. That is kind of you to offer that. And no, having been to at least 8 stores looking for jar lids, they're a little tough to come by right now. Apparently everybody that planted the garden is now wanting to can the garden. So, and a friend said that will be the next round of COVID is the food poisoning from badly canned food. But that was, she's kind of.
Touche.
I don't know.
But if you do want some, just let me know so that I can account for extra purchases.
Very good. Well, all right, folks, until next time, we'll see you in a couple weeks for our Monday night regular meeting. And thanks for dropping in. Thanks for being part of this. And if you didn't get your questions answered, don't hesitate to ask one of us via email, something else.
Ready?
Because we want you to get them answered. So.